Today's podcast, we're going to get into Trump's speech before Congress, the longest of its kind, broke a record like Trump likes to do. We're also going to get into the reaction from both sides of the aisle. That and so much more. Thanks for listening. Tuesday night, Trump spoke before Congress for the first time since starting his second term. It was not without fireworks, as per the normal with Trump. It was a long speech. Goodness gracious, it lasted over 90 minutes, beating other records. I think Bill Clinton had a State of the Union address that lasted 88 minutes. This one beat that one. It was a good speech by Trump. I think he did himself well. It was very, like I said, entertaining, to say the least. We're going to get into a lot. We're going to play some of the audio from the speech. We're going to play some of the reaction of the speech also from both sides of the aisle. There's a lot to get to today. Throughout the speech, Trump basically laid out his view and his plan for the country and for the world, really. He's focused a lot on domestic issues, which was a smart strategy for him because basically the American people, that's their primary concern. That's their primary focus. So him focusing on that was a good idea. Even early on in the speech had its interruptions, of course. Democrats throughout the speech were heckling and booing and hollering throughout it. Trump kept his cool. You could tell that he was having a good time. He's very comfortable up there. Early on in the speech, Trump basically started out by laying out his vision for the country. He started on saying that America was back, that we were back to where we needed to be, that we have new leadership. It was enjoyable to watch. It really was. It's a stark contrast from Joe Biden's previous, his last State of the Union address. He dealt a lot with social issues throughout the speech. Towards the beginning of his speech, he talked about wokeness a lot. He talked about transgender issue. He talked about men and women's sports. He dealt a lot on those issues, and that was really smart of him, I think. The fact is, those are winning issues for him. You look at the polling, you look at all of the data, that's a winning issue for Trump. So him focusing on that heavily in his speech was a great idea.
We've ended the tyranny of so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion policies all across the entire federal government and indeed the private sector and our military. And our country will be woke no longer.
Woke no longer. That's what he said in the speech. This thing's a great strategy. Keep on hammering on those issues that won him the election. I think most of Americans are clearly against men and women playing sports together, especially men playing in women's sports. It's very clear that if you look at any polling, that the majority of Americans are against that. So keep on hammering that. And throughout the speech, even on issues that were even less controversial, and we'll get into some of those. Trump brought up a lot of people that he had guests that he brought to this speech and mentioned them multiple times, different stories, different ones, and even on stuff that was clearly not partisan, that was just good, wholesome Americana stuff. The Democrats refused to stand; they refused to applaud throughout the entire speech. And even early on, they decided they were going to not play along. The drama all started with Representative Al Green. Green is Al Green is he's the representative from Houston area, so a very liberal area. So Al Green has been in Congress a long time at this point. He's an elderly man. He actually waved his cane at Trump when he made this spectacle. Representative Al Green stood up early in the speech and heckled at the president. He kept on heckling at him about how he did not have a mandate from the people to do the things he was doing, which is just an absurd argument. Let's be honest. You can look at how much Trump won compared to how much he won last time. You can look at the fact that he won the popular vote. He won more than enough electoral votes. So clearly there is a mandate. There is an expectation from the American people on what he should be doing. And Trump has been honest. Trump was honest during the election, okay? He laid out his agenda, and he was clear about it. He was clear about what he wanted to do on the foreign policy level. He was clear about what the things he wanted to do on the domestic level. He was clear about Doge. He was clear about Elon Musk and what role he would play. He was clear about all these things, and yet he still won the popular vote, all the electoral votes necessary, and increased in percentage from last time he ran and won. So for people to say that he doesn't have a mandate is an absurd statement. So I don't understand the benefit with them starting it off and Al Green yelling this to the president, of all the things to yell at him. It was kind of absurd, but this is how it went down.
Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the sergeant at arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
So Speaker Mike Johnson ordered the sergeant at arms for the Capitol to escort Representative Green out of the chamber due to him being a disruption. You could tell that Speaker Johnson was kind of prepared for this because he had it already wrote down in front of him, the procedures, and he read the procedures as soon as Representative Green stood up and started yelling at the president. Word must have got around that, there was going to be some disruption. So it was no surprise to Mike Johnson. He was prepared. But I've never seen this before. I've watched plenty of joint session of Congress, plenty of State of the Union addresses. Never seen a representative be escorted out by the Sergeant at Arms. Usually the only thing you see of the Sergeant at Arms is him just announcing the President of the United States when he walks in. So it happened early on in the speech, and you could just kind of tell this is how it's going to go tonight, I guess. Representative Green was the only one they escorted out. But throughout the speech, the entire speech, no matter what the topic was, the Democrats on the left side of the seating refused to stand, refused to clap, except for one thing. We'll get into that. And throughout him speaking, President Trump speaking, they hollered, they heckled the entire time. I mean, it got really loud a couple of times, and you almost thought that Speaker Johnson would have to slam the gavel down again and get somebody else out. So it was very interesting and entertaining, to say the least, throughout the entire speech if you watched it. And if you haven't watched it, I encourage you to do so. But it was a bad look to me. It was just a bad look for the Democrats. It made them look petty. It made them look weak, which is fine with me. I'm not a Democrat. But if you are, to me, if you're an honest one and you're looking at this, you have to admit it was not a good night for them. It just made them look bad as a party. I honestly don't think they know how to be in opposition to this agenda. They keep on supporting things, first of all, that are just dumb, and that clearly the American people do not support. Trump, like I said, brought up many domestic issues, including a lot of trans issues. Boys playing in women's sports was a big one. And he brought on he mentioned a couple people during the speech, had them stand, and the people clapped. People who were victims of allowing men to play in women's sports. And the Democrats refused to acknowledge it. They refused to clap for the people. They refused to even stand and many times even heckled during Trump's speech while he was mentioning those things. It just looked terrible. And they don't know how to resist. They don't seem very unified and having a strong message against him this time. During his first term, they had a lot that they were unified on, that they were using to provide an opposition to the president. But this time they just seem kind of discombobulated and disjointed. So as the speech continued, like I said, Trump dealt a lot with the domestic issues. Very good strategy. He brought up Doge. He brought up Elon Musk, allowed Elon Musk to stand, and of course all the Republicans applauded and Democrats booed. And thankfully, Elon Musk was actually wearing a suit and tie, so that was good. He looked good in a suit and tie. He should do that more often, much more professional. But he brought up, Trump did during his speech, about all the wasteful things they were finding, that the Department of Government Efficiency was finding throughout the different departments in the administration in the government. And he listed some of them, and it was a really good moment for him.
$40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. Nobody knows what that is. $8 million to promote LGBTQI+ in the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of. $60 million for indigenous peoples and Afro-Colombian empowerment in Central America. $60 million. $8 billion for making mice transgender. This is real. $32 million for a left-wing propaganda operation in Moldova. $10 million for male circumcision in Mozambique. $20 million for the Arab Sesame Street in the Middle East. It's a program. $20 million for a program. $1.9 billion to recently created Decarbonization of Homes Committee, headed up, and we know she's involved. Just at the last moment, the money was passed over by a woman named Stacey Abrams. Have you ever heard of her? A $3.5 million consulting contract for lavish fish monitoring. $1.5 billion for voter confidence in Liberia. $14 million for social cohesion in Mali. $59 million for illegal alien hotel rooms in New York City. He's a real estate developer. He's done very well. $250,000 to increase vegan local climate action innovation in Zambia. $42 million for social and behavior change in Uganda. $14 million for improving public procurement in Serbia. $47 million for improving learning outcomes in Asia. Asia's doing very well with learning. I don't know what we're doing.
So it was hilarious, but it was scary. It was kind of amazing, the things he was listing off. And the Democrats, many of them were holding up these signs throughout the speech. They were signs that said, incorrect or don't destroy Medicaid, Medicare, and different things like that. They were just obnoxious. It was not a good look for them. Trump administration is going in and finding all this wasteful spending, a lot of that through the U.S. aid, and finding all this waste, and then he's bringing up and listing all those things during the speech. It was great. Now, early in the speech, Trump said that, hey, he stopped for a second and kind of looked at the Democrats and pointed at them, and he said, now, I understand that no matter what I say during the speech, I'm not going to get any applause from you guys. He's like, I could basically cure the worst disease in the world. I could fix all these problems, but it would not matter because you guys are not going to support. You're not going to applaud. You're not going to stand. And it kind of, that moment was a key moment in the speech because it kind of took all the thunder away from the Democrats. That basically anything they did would just kind of stole the air right out of them. It's a good strategy, and it was really smart. Trump also brought up Social Security and Medicaid fraud, and it was a really good moment also.
Social Security databases are age over 160 years old. We have a healthier country than I thought, Bobby. Including, to finish, 1,039 people between the ages of 220 and 229. One person between the age of 240 and 249, and one person is listed at 360 years of age. More than 100 years, more than 100 years older than our country.
Just another great moment. Another great moment. And of course, Democrats were waving their lies markers. It looked like they were bidding for some antique furniture or something the whole time. But just great moments throughout the speech. Definitely one of Trump's better speeches. You could tell he was having a good time, and it really came across great throughout the speech. So after Trump kind of laid out his domestic policy and took some lashes at the Democrats on the other side, he started mentioning people throughout the speech, people that were in the audience. And one of the kind of more heartwarming moments was when he brought up his 13-year-old child who had been battling brain cancer, and the doctors had not expected him to live as long as he had lived. And he was in the audience, and Trump recognized him, and it was a really good moment. Listen to a little bit of that.
He is 13 years old, and he has always dreamed of becoming a police officer. But in 2018, DJ was diagnosed with brain cancer. The doctors gave him 5 months at most to live. That was more than 6 years ago.
Now you can look at this if you watch the video. The Democrats during this moment are not applauding. Okay? They're not standing. They are sitting on their hands. This is amazing to me. This looks terrible. Like I said, I'm not a Democrat. But even if you're an honest one and you're looking at this, you know this looks terrible. And this happened multiple times during this speech, where something very heartwarming was brought up, and it had no response from the Democrats. It looked terrible for them.
Since that time, DJ and his dad have been on a quest to make his dream come true, and DJ has been sworn in as an honorary law enforcement officer, actually a number of times. The police love him, the police departments love him. And tonight, DJ, we're going to do you the biggest honor of them all. I am asking our new Secret Service Director, Sean Curran, to officially make you an agent of the United States Secret Service.
Just a great moment. The director of the Secret Service comes over and hands him a badge, and of course the kid gives the director a big hug. It's good stuff. Good stuff. I think Trump just really looked good in these moments, and it just was heartwarming all the way around. Just amazing, the response of the Democrats. Really was. It was amazing. So Trump also brought up crime throughout the country. He dealt a lot with illegal immigration and how he had changed it, and how he dealt with illegal immigration so far in his first couple months as president. You can scratch that out. He brought up how much he supports law enforcement, and bringing up this family of the officer that was slain. After bringing up the slain police officer, he talks briefly about executive order that he had signed, making it a capital offense, basically to kill a police officer, be punished by death penalty. And he also requested Congress and pushed for Congress to pass another crime bill, basically to be harsher on crime, and this is how that sounded.
Signed an executive order requiring a mandatory death penalty for anyone who murders a police officer, and tonight I'm asking Congress to pass that policy into permanent law. I'm also asking for a new crime bill getting tough on repeat offenders while enhancing protections for America's police officers so they can do their jobs without fear of their lives being totally destroyed. They don't want to be killed. We're not going to let them be killed.
You can hear, even while Trump is proposing this crime bill and such, you can hear the Democrats in the background heckling. And like I said, that was like a regular thing throughout the entire speech. So after Trump kind of dealt heavily with the domestic issues, he then did dab a little bit in some foreign policy stuff. Right before the speech, he stated that he had received a letter from President Zelensky, president of Ukraine, saying that he wanted to make a deal, that he wanted to make a deal with Trump over the mineral rights trade agreement that was supposed to be signed last week by the two presidents. And as you remember, we spoke about it in the show, got heated during that exchange between Trump, Zelensky, and Vice President J.D. Vance. And it was all over the news about how this was a catastrophe, and that it made the country look bad. And now, because of President Trump losing his cool, which he didn't, but losing his cool, that we were never going to get a deal now with Zelensky, that he was just playing into the hands of the Russians, and it really hurt the U.S. Well, it turns out it didn't hurt us that bad, and that Trump was able to still get a deal. And everybody was saying, this is going to lead to World War III, that this is terrible, that this is an embarrassment, how Trump spoke to Zelensky in the meeting, and how terrible it was, and how basically, there was no chance for a deal now. Well, it turns out there was. Turns out it wasn't in the world, and that Zelensky, when he left and came to his senses that he shot himself in the foot, that maybe he needs to just accept the deal that the president proposed to him. So this is how that went.
I'm also working tirelessly to end the savage conflict in Ukraine. Millions of Ukrainians and Russians have been needlessly killed or wounded in this horrific and brutal conflict with no end in sight. The United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense, with no security, with no anything.
Hold that. So I want to point out, this is the only time that the Democrats applauded. The only time. They didn't applaud when the 13-year-old became an honorary Secret Service agent. They didn't applaud, or also in Trump, also, he brought a young man who was trying to get in West Point and had a really high grade point average and was just a kind of an American all-star. And Trump accepted him to West Point during the speech, completely surprised that young man. They didn't applaud when that happened. They didn't applaud when Trump talked about and honored the different individuals, families that had lost loved ones by illegal immigrants. And now he started to crack down on illegal immigration. They didn't applaud on any of that. They applauded, and the only time they applauded was when Trump mentioned the funding that had been given to the Ukrainians, to a foreign power who's having a war on the other end of the world. That's the only time. It just looks terrible. How despicable. How despicable. Only time they applauded. Only time.
Do you want to keep it going for another 5 years? Yeah, you would say Pocahontas says yes.
That was great. That was great. Oh, Elizabeth Warren.
2,000 people are being killed every single week. More than that. They're Russian young people. They're Ukrainian young people. They're not Americans, but I want it to stop. Meanwhile, Europe has sadly spent more money buying Russian oil and gas than they have spent on defending Ukraine, by far. Think of that. They've spent more buying Russian oil and gas than they have defending. And we've spent perhaps $350 billion, like taking candy from a baby. That's what happened. And they've spent $100 billion. What a difference that is. And we have an ocean separating us, and they don't. But we're getting along very well with them, and lots of good things are happening. Biden has authorized more money in this fight than Europe has spent, by billions and billions of dollars. It's hard to believe that they wouldn't have stopped it and said, at some point, come on, let's equalize. You got to be equal to us. But that didn't happen. Earlier today, I received an important letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine.
We'll hold it right there. I mean, he brings up an excellent point. It's what I said in a previous episode. The Europeans have not been involved as much as we have in the amount of money that we've sent. This collection of countries that literally sits on the border of Ukraine has not given like we have. And then Zelensky's going to come over here when he met with Trump and J.D. Vance and whine and complain and saying that we're not giving enough security guarantees and we're not doing this. Are you kidding me? We've given much more than all these countries have. And that's just the way it works around the world. Time and time again. The U.S. will bend over backwards for a country. And they'll turn around and run us through the mud the first chance they get. And under this president, it ain't going to happen. And that's the difference. And I have a feeling the majority of Americans approve of this. The majority of Americans want to see more of this throughout the world.
The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians, he said. My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts. We do really value how much America has done to help Ukraine maintain its sovereignty and independence. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it at any time that is convenient for you. I appreciate that he sent this letter, just got it a little while ago. Simultaneously, we've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful?
This is what happens when you have strong leadership. Zelensky left the meeting where he shot himself in the foot. He realized, you know what? They kind of were offering me the best deal I'm going to get. And he turns around before Trump gives this speech for the nation and writes a letter, sends it to Trump. Hey, lets him know, you know what? I'm sorry the way I acted. I want to work with you. Let's sign this deal. That's what happens when you have strong leadership. And all the media talking heads that were talking about how this was the end of any deal, the way Trump acted and J.D. Vance acted in the Oval Office meeting, and how it was basically the end of the world. Oh no, Trump was able to get it done. That's what happens when you have strong leadership. I've said it over and over again. If Joe Biden was in the office still, or if Kamala Harris was in office, there would be no end in sight to this war. There just wouldn't be. We would endlessly be giving money to them. Trump brought it up in the speech. It would continue and continue and continue. More and more people would have died. That's not leadership. That's not good leadership. But Trump, while campaigning for president, his third time, said he wanted to end the war. And he's talked to Russia, he's talked to Ukraine, and he's trying his best to make it happen. Instead of us endlessly, year after year, giving more and more and more money, Trump's actually trying to bring peace. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing. Good stuff. So now we're going to get into some of the reaction from both sides. People on the left were just losing their minds, of course, over this speech. And there was some honesty within the media about how terrible it looked for the Democrats to be sitting on their hands the entire speech, even when you had really good stories and good things happening. It just looked bad from purely a marketing perspective. It just looked terrible. And surprisingly, Jake Tapper was probably one of the more honest ones. That's what he had to say.
You can really sense, John King, you can really sense Republicans with a pep in their step and Democrats rather demoralized. The Democrats, not to be cliche about it, but they are in disarray. They do not know how to be the opposition force.
Correct. What I said earlier in the show. They're so disorganized. They do not know how to put out a good message of anti-Trump message. They just do not. They just keep on shooting themselves in the foot, honestly. One of the dumbest things that was said right after the speech came from no other than NBC. We'll play that.
I hope he lives and the life he wants to live. He wants to be a cop. He knows what he wants to do. And maybe when you have childhood cancer, that crystallizes for you. And I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer. But I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide. And I hope he isn't one who has to testify against the people who carried out acts of seditious conspiracy and then live to see Donald Trump pardon those people.
So you can see, even in moments like them bringing up the 13-year-old boy with brain cancer, they still got to make it political. They still have to turn it into some political thing instead of just making a good, American story. I just think people are tired of it. And the media has lost all their credibility over the last decade, and them pulling stunts like that just make it even worse. So it just was not a good look for the Democrat Party, just not a good look for the media. It just did not look good for them. All right, now we're going to get some response from some people on the right. I think one of the best summarizations of the speech and how it went down, what came from Sean Hannity on Fox News, and it just really kind of summed everything up.
Democrats tonight were so pathetic. They couldn't even stand for Laken Riley's family, Jocelyn Nungary, his mother, a slain officer's wife, Stephanie Diller. They couldn't even stand for a beautiful 13-year-old cancer survivor who dreams of being a police officer and tonight became a Secret Service agent, DJ Daniel. He said, "This is my 5th time at a joint address from President Trump. And sadly, there is nothing this president could do or say that would make these Democrats stand and cheer. This has now become a party of rage and hate, a radicalized party reduced to a collective temper tantrum, sitting on their hands doing nothing for the American people. But tonight, this is also a defeated party. No solutions, no coherent message, no plan for the future, simply reduced to political stunts and smears and outright lies."
I mean, he's right. He's right. It just really looked bad for them. Really did. Ted Cruz, senator from Texas, was also interviewed after the speech, and this is what he had to say.
This was fantastic. Tonight was incredible. This is the 5th State of the Union address I've seen Trump give. It was by far his best. We're just over a month into it, and he had a litany of victories that we've already won, one after the other after the other. Listen, I thought he was joyful. I thought he was forward-looking. I thought he had the promise of America front and center. And I got to say the contrast. I have never seen such a disgraceful display as the Democrats put on. I've been to 13 State of the Union addresses altogether since I've been in the Senate. I've been to every one. I've never missed one. It started from the moment he walked in and was introduced, the President of the United States. Not a single Democrat stood, not a single Democrat applauded, not one. I've never seen that happen. Every time Joe Biden walked into that chamber and they introduced him as the President of the United States, I stood my butt up and I clapped. Every time Barack Obama walked in, I stood up and clapped. Even when I couldn't stand their policies, even when I was horrified at what they were doing, I respect the office of the President of the United States, and I respect the American people.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That was Senator Ted Cruz. He was talking about how even when President Obama was in office, President Biden, the Republicans, the other side of the aisle, still applauded when he came in and was announced, Mr. Speaker, President of the United States by the Sergeant at Arms, still applauded, still showed respect. The Democrats didn't do any of that. Like I said, the only time they stood and clapped was for funding for a foreign nation and a foreign war on the other side of the world. The optics of that is just, it's terrible. It's just terrible. Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, the day after had this to say about the speech.
And as President Trump asked in his speech last night, how could anyone possibly be opposed to any of this action that he is taking? Well, apparently, the modern-day Democrat Party could. The behavior of Democrats last night was completely disgraceful and demonstrated how severely out of touch they are with the American public. It was the most shameful moment in the history of presidential addresses in that beautiful chamber. Democrats didn't stand to keep men out of women's sports. They couldn't even clap for a girl who got her head smashed in by a man on a volleyball court. Democrats didn't stand for an innocent and beautiful child who is surviving brain cancer. They opposed eliminating taxes on tips and Social Security. They didn't stand in favor of cutting taxes for hardworking Americans. They couldn't even clap for 2 mothers whose daughters were killed by illegal aliens. One of the only things that could get Democrats off their feet last night was cheering for Ukraine, not for America. Last night was a very clarifying moment for our country. The Democrats exposed themselves as the party of insanity and hate, the party that wants to put America last.
She's right. She's right. Just really was a good night for the Republican Party, for Donald Trump. Really a good night for him. It's been said multiple times, but I think it was definitely one of his better speeches. Just really good optics. It was a great thing. Other than it being insanely long. Gracious. I think I don't know if he wants to break records. So he tries to push it out as far as he can. But gracious, not getting to bed till after 11 was a little much. A little much. Just saying. If I had to complain about one thing, just one thing, that would have been one of them. Just could you cut it down a little bit? Maybe, an hour, 45 minutes. Cut it back a little bit. But other than that, it was a good speech. Other news. Tim Waltz is back in the news. Old Tim Waltz, governor of Minnesota and former vice presidential candidate who ran with Kamala Harris. Fox News is reporting failed 2024 Democratic vice presidential candidate and current Minnesota governor recently floated a potential 2028 presidential run. Waltz ran alongside former Vice President Kamala Harris on the Democratic ticket in the 2024 election cycle last year. Waltz at first kind of brushed off the question from the media when he was first asked, before saying he would run if the opportunity presented itself. Quoting Waltz, he said, "Well, I have a friend tell me never turn down a job when you haven't been offered. If I think I could offer something, I would certainly consider that," he said. "I'm also, though, not arrogant enough to believe there's a lot of people that do this." He said that under the current circumstances, and if he has the right skill set for the 2028 race, I'll do it. So there it is. Tim Waltz, presidential candidate. Run. Please run. I'm good with it. He was just a terrible candidate and would make an easy target for any Republican that runs against him. So please run. It's fine with me. Ain't gonna hurt my feelings. And I mean, there's been other names floating around that may run in 2028. Kamala Harris may run again. That's been pushed around a lot. That's fine. But it just goes to show you that the Democrat Party really does not have any star that can step up and lead the party and be a good, strong candidate for president. Will that change? Will someone be pulled out of the ashes? And who knows? We'll see. It'll all be interesting. I mean, the problem with Tim Walz is that he's kind of a goofy guy, and there's a lot of material to make fun of him with. I mean, you remember back during the election, he was called Tampon Tim by President Trump and by many on the right. He had a lot of gaffes during the election cycle things that he said. So he's just kind of a goofy guy, so it does bring a lot of material. But bottom line is they don't have anybody new. They don't have anybody fresh. They just have to keep on resorting back to the old names, old faces. And it just kind of shows you the state of the Democrat Party currently. Like I said, that might change. Maybe some big name will come out and seal the show. We'll see. All right, that's all we have today, folks. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to the show. Support us as we continue to grow. Bye.
Mm-hmm.